we're here today in the studio giving a Jugular exclusive. What is Jugular? Jugular is a special science and performing arts event which was held as a cabaret over the summer at secret Garden Partym Wilderness, and it's actually coming to London as a secret immersive experience which we've transformed. And this radio show today is going to sort of introduce you to the concepts behind joining science and performing arts. And today we have a plethora of scientists and artists in the rather crowded and warm studio. So everybody say hello.
Hello. Hello.
You can hear that, right? So I'll go around the room one by one. And first up, we're going to talk to Dr Martin Austwick.
Hello. I'm a scientist at UCL. I work on the complexity of cities. That's my subject area. And I came to that from being a physicist, undergraduate physics, solid-state physics PhD, and medical physics a bit later. And the nice thing about this topic is that it's the sort of thing that, because we're talking about cities, lots of people live in cities, you can relate the science that I do to everyday life to people's experiences.
And so specifically you work in complexity. Is that something that people need to know what exactly that is, and how is it applicable?
Yeah, complexity is a very broad field. It seems to involve anything that scientists find difficult, but it's basically systems where there's so many elements interacting. It's very difficult to predict the outcomes. So it comes out of things like chaos theory, which is slightly different, but ties into the same sorts of ideas about can we build mathematical models to explain things, but can we actually predict things in practice? Okay, and what would you call a system? Well, I suppose a system is something that a scientist defines the scientist defines the system themselves. So, like in a city, you could pick out a subset. You could one of the things I've done work on is Boris bikes. So you could look at transport, you could look at bikes, you could look at the sewage system, you could look at electricity, you could look at mobile phones, and you could say, well, that's a closed system in some way, even though it interacts with the rest of the world as well.
The human brain.
The human brain, yeah, absolutely, yeah. You have ecosystems, you have weather systems. Mm-hmm. They're all in some way connected sets of objects, if you like.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings me to my PhD topic. So my name is Shama Rahman. I'm your presenter for today, and came up with the idea of Jugular about nearly a year ago now. And I'm also a performing artist, as you are, Martin.
Yeah, I'm also a musician. So almost as long as I've been a physicist, I've been a guitar player and a singer and a songwriter. So occasionally they coincide. Last year I did an album of songs about science. Often they just sort of coexist peacefully and don't interfere with one another too much. But occasionally they clash in the science songs projects. So.
And there you go. So we're both working in complexity. And for me particularly, I'm looking at the neuroscience of musical creativity. Coming towards the end. In fact, we have another PhD student here just behind us called Adam. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Adam. I'm a PhD student based at Imperial College. I work in the Centre of Cold Matter. My job is basically to take the strange laws of quantum mechanics and see if we can create some technologies out of them.
Mm-hmm. For both of you, I'd like to ask, what actually got you interested in science in the first place? So
for me, kind of the appeal of science, even from a very young age, was that it was quite anarchic. I liked the fact that it was always the rebel, the person who went against the grain, who made the big discoveries, and that kind of appealed to my teenage self.
Okay.
I also find it kind of really stretches your imagination, particularly when you're trying to deal with something as counterintuitive as quantum mechanics. Like, you really have to rack your brain to get your head around any idea of what's going on at those kind of scales.
And in terms of stretching the imagination, I'd like to turn to Dr Marek Kukula over here, who's the public astronomer, or I'd really like to call you a royal astronomer because you're at the Royal Observatory. So I'd love to ask you what first got you into what you're doing.
well, that's a very good question. I think I was one of those annoying kids who was always asking questions. And I was just fascinated by the world around me. So, anything that's beautiful or looks interesting, you want to know more about it. But I guess a bit like Adam, I was kind of inspired by a really famous scientific figure, a famous scientist, and that was Doctor Who. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be the Doctor and travel the universe and just explore.
Interstellar travel, yeah.
Absolutely.
And could you tell us a little bit about your particular area of research?
Okay, it's very easy because I wanted to understand where the universe came from, and so really the whole story of why we're here, how we got to be here. And I did that by looking at very distant parts of the universe and comparing them to the local universe, so our galaxy and the galaxies around us, to see what the differences and the similarities were.
So would you say you're a cosmologist?
No, although what I was doing was sort of shading into cosmology, but there are all sorts of different strands in astronomy. So I would call myself an extragalactic astronomer, which doesn't mean that I'm from outside the galaxy. It just means I study other galaxies than ours.
Cool. And this brings me to the plethora of artists that are surrounding us now. I'd like to start with Deborah, who's all the way at the other end.
Hello. Oh, hiya.
Hi, Deborah. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yes, my name's Deborah, and I work with spoken word, physical theatre and stories. I started writing poetry when I was really young, and I loved words, and then I just had no words left, and I didn't know how to express myself. I'd been studying philosophy, and I'd filled my head with so many words that I just wanted to move my body, and I found movement, dance, physical theatre was a way that I could express myself, and I studied, and now I make theatre as we have done through a devising process, and I have started writing again, which is really nice. It's like been 3 years, and then I started writing again. So I write stories and poetry now.
Yes, you're part of the Jugular Corps, and you helped us devise everything for the summer festivals. And I'd love to introduce Sarah Blissett, who's sitting next to you, who's also working in the body, and she's just joined us anew for the project that's coming up on the 29th of November.
Yes. Hi there, my name's Sarah Blissett, and I've been working with Shama on developing the more kind of immersive, interactive aspects of the piece, from the festival performances to now making it sort of site-specific in London. I am a performance artist and dramaturg, and also an aerialist, so that's what my sort of performance in this piece is as an aerial artist.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Taking it to a new level.
Literally.
And I'd love to, at this point, ask Rob, who's very busily also taking films of us in the studio here, who's actually a 3D animator, another newcomer to the whole project, and I believe will also be working with Sarah.
Yeah, I got into the project because I made a piece about the life cycle of a star, a 3D piece, a couple of months ago, inspired by some things I read by Michio Kaku. And then, yeah.
Who is?
I guess he's a physicist, but he calls himself like a popularizer of science. And I've been, following like Radiolab and these kind of interesting ways of getting science into the public kind of imagination for a couple of years now.
And what got you interested in animation as a form of art form?
It's kind of, there's the kind of interesting like difference between like actually simulating something and showing how something works using figures and getting it to be exactly right. And also, I come from basically an abstract art background with a kind of quite a strong understanding of science, like from growing up, and just the images, the imagery of science is one of the most kind of, all around us, and also the most beautiful and detailed map of the world we have at the moment. And so to kind of get that and kind of take it apart and use parts of it to, and explain it to people is a really interesting thing. To turn it into, from like figures into shapes is an interesting thing.
So I guess you have to have quite a lot of technical know-how in order to implement your sort of moving images.
Yeah, you kind of you'll gradually build up things, and you small steps.
And this actually brings me to the newest member of our Jugular core, Omar Ibrahim.
Hello, Shama.
Hello, Omar. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's quite surreal to be here, to be honest. I found out about this project yesterday. And suddenly, here I am, surrounded by people probably far more educated than myself, but nonetheless I'm here and I'm going to voice my opinions and what I believe.
Omar's a stand-up comedian.
I am, yeah, I'm trying hard. This is the first gig I've had in a while, actually. So, yeah. I trained as an actor 4 years ago, and I've recently been getting in more into kind of writing, stand-up, different kind of sketch comedy, things like that. And I'm very interested and excited as to how it's all going to kind of merge in this project.
Brilliant. And finally, behind me, we've got William, who plays the violin.
Yeah, you're right, Shama.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. All right.
So, what first got you interested in playing the violin?
Oh, well, it was kind of like music's kind of like quite a family thing for me. So it was always like my mother right from the word go. It was always there. Really, like my big sister played fiddle as well.
Mm-hmm.
I always had like my mum was playing piano with me, always giving me the support and everything that I guess I was kind of quite lucky like that to have that support. You know what I mean? But I guess now I just take it with me, like to just play music to whoever is the whole world is there.
And you're going to be playing with me later on in this show.
Yeah.
So Will's going to be playing with me later, along with Christopher Lane, who's going to be playing on the guitar, for a song called Time, which we did as a response to one of the themes over the summer cabaret show on perception of time. So that's later. But first off, I would like to start off the general panel discussion, which is Marek and Martin and Adam. You're all very interested in communicating your research, but in slightly different ways. Could we get you to talk about your individual ways?
Sure, yeah. Well, I do a variety of things, I guess. Music is one of them, although that's a fairly recent thing. I do a fair amount of public talks. I did so sort of tying in like the science songs. This year I did a songwriting competition for young people, which was really nice. And then the winners kind of who were a couple of 18-year-olds came along to Green Man Festival and helped me run a songwriting workshop there for kind of families and kids and things like that. So that was a really fun experience. So yeah, kind of bits and bobs. I've done things like Bright Club and Science Show Off, which are the sort of slightly more stand-up-y end of public communication and public talks. So yeah, kind of a bit of a gadfly as far as that goes.
And yourself?
Well, I mean, like Martin, when I was a researcher, I used to do a lot of talks to school kids and the public, but now at Greenwich, my job at the Observatory is actually full-time communicating science to the public. So if you haven't been, do come and visit us. Most of the site is free. You can see galleries explaining the latest astronomical ideas, black holes, supernovae, that kind of thing, dark matter, dark energy. We run a lot of talks. We get scientists in to talk about the latest research, but in a very accessible way. We have a planetarium, so we can show people the stars even during the daytime. And we do a lot of other cool stuff, like the Astronomer's Ball, which we did last year with the Secret Garden Party. So we try to get the science out there in as many different ways as possible to appeal to as many different people as possible.
And what's made you go into outreach full time?
I loved being a research scientist, but I discovered when I went out to talk to especially school kids, and you tell them about the stuff that you're working on, and they get so excited about it, and it reminded me that I was excited about it too, and I kind of felt this is so important. Science is so important. People need to give more of their time to go out there and get the message out to as many people as they can.
Mm-hmm. What well, I've got this question here, which is, well, you guys have kind of answered this. What methods do you use to communicate the science? But in a sense, I'd like to ask Adam, why do you choose the methods? You're at a slightly different position in your career. You're a PhD student, and do you find it quite different in terms of the outreach work that you do, for example?
Yeah, so compared to these guys, I'm probably quite a bit less experienced in terms of outreach. I've been doing it for about a year and a half now. So I've done the kind of stand-up talks where you have like a high-impact demonstration. Like we fire a ping pong ball at 300 miles an hour just using the air molecules that are bouncing around in the room, which is quite fun to do. But one thing I'm quite interested in getting involved in, which I've done a little bit of, is trying to use magic to show quantum mechanics. So magic is quite counterintuitive and surprising, and the effects of magic and quantum mechanical effects are also quite surprising, and it's quite interesting how you can use the two together. It's actually a little bit controversial amongst some people, because
how come?
Well, because magic in its very nature is lying. So
illusions, yes.
You're not really showing someone a quantum mechanical effect, you're showing them a lie. But I think as long as you're honest about the fact that you're lying, that's fine. This isn't really, I'm not really making this ball disappear and appear somewhere else, but in the world of quantum mechanics, actually things can disappear from one place and appear in another. So I think that's okay. I think it's ethical.
And how do some of the artists find like this very idea of Schrödinger's cat that actually comes from quantum mechanics? Can a cat be both alive and dead at the same time?
No is the answer.
Omo says no.
No.
I think I'm really interested in that, the illusion of choice in magic in particular, and sort of how it is then with that audience interaction, how you kind of build up that trick and you kind of you allow them to follow you in the way that you're presenting this world. And I think that's, for me, that's my understanding of the kind of the quantum mechanics. It's just sort of a different perception of the world, a sort of a different way of thinking about things with being alive and dead at the same time. So yeah.
It's kind of like what I sort of wanted to ask the question, like outreach has a lot of sort of different faces currently in the form of, say, lectures or form of sort of didactic teaching or even sort of demonstrative, experiments or chemistry explosions. Do you think that there are other ways of understanding science or communication? Like, for example, you do stuff through music. Is there a particular reason that you go into that?
Well, as I say, the two are sort of separate strands, and at some point someone said, you should put those two together. I think...
Who's that somebody? Is that you?
It's probably my wife. I think there's an interesting point there, because there's lots of different purposes for science outreach, and there's a lot of people now who are saying things like science outreach shouldn't be a variation on the lecture. It should be a conversation. It should be something where you go, okay, well, here's all this great stuff about astronomy. How can you get involved? Things like Galaxy Zoo, where they got people identifying galaxies. People,
a crowd sort of.
Yeah, just like a whole group of people contributing to scientific research and genuinely being part of a participatory project. So there's that side of things, and then there's the side of things that I guess Jugular's part of, which is, that conversation between arts and science, which is like a split that's just gone back years and years and years. And the question is, how do you bring those groups together, and how do they share ideas? So there's lots of different media and mechanisms for science outreach, but there's lots of different reasons you might do it. One of them might be you might want to recruit people for your university or for your company, but then there's all these other things that go around that are totally separate.
And have you ever felt that you wanted to express your science in a slightly different way, Marek?
That's a very good question. I like to think that I'm very sort of talented artistically, but so far all of my efforts have been confined, to the singing in the shower kind of regime. But maybe one day.
Do you have a recording of that?
Not yet, but maybe next time. Science is a very creative thing to do. I think people often forget that actually it's about looking at the world around you and thinking very creatively about ways of putting bits of information together, trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's constantly creative. It's constantly about ideas and throwing up new ideas, comparing ideas. So I do feel that side of my creative side is kind of expressed through the science that I do, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'd love to ask Deborah. She's putting up a hand here. You can't see this. Why is there, do you think, this perception of science being rather sort of reductionist or dry in a way and not creative?
Well, I was going to approach it the opposite way round, which is that I think the process of creativity is scientific. If you're looking at the idea that science is observation and a creative mind, whether it's a theatre maker or a painter, is their very first thing to do is simply observe the world around them, but we're looking at it in a different way. So as we were saying earlier, with physical theatre, you are looking at how the body holds and expresses perhaps laws of physics, or the rhythms that materials move or different elements move. And I'm aware as I'm saying this as someone who may not have tried to move the rhythm of a dripping raindrop or move the rhythm of an elastic that gets to tension and then breaks, might have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yes,
and how
you went
that
to LISPA,
looks.
didn't you? Where you basically spend 2 or 3 months essentially doing one movement, or you're perfecting it.
Yeah, we do movement sequences which are developed out of materials and physically observed things, and you're always looking at the rhythm of something. And what's so wonderful for me is when you begin to understand how, working from that place, you can develop an entire story, a narrative, which often has a much greater depth and feeling than if I perhaps approached it with my mind. I would like to tell a story about this. No, I find a story that comes out of an observation, when expressed with 2, 3, 4 bodies, creates characters in the space and dynamics in the space that are beyond my ability when I'm thinking logically. That's my experience.
And we've touched upon story, which is a very sort of big tie-in in the concept of Jugular. So the full title, Jugular Joining the Head and the Heart, and that's where sort of we arrived at the whole name from. I'd like to ask Sarah, I mean, what got you sort of interested particularly in Jugular? Like, do you see sort of the sort of story that ties in between the arts and the science?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel very much that it is about kind of that world in which the science and art have that kind of reciprocal relationship, and everything is kind of tied together. And it's, I think, something that we've been working on as to how you lead that audience through that world and sort of introduce those elements in a way that sort of you can emphasize that cohesion. And I mean, for me with my movement practice, I think I'm really interested in kinesthetic sense and the sense in the audience is when they're watching the performance as much as the performers themselves, and the sort of the connection between motion and matter. And sort of for me, looking more at the science of it, I've been kind of reading more Samuel Butler as well, and he talks about sort of the matter and motion and the interconnectivity, and sort of that's been influencing my approach to this piece.
So you find it quite different working towards producing something for Jugular than you would normally find in your normal artistic process? I
think I'm more aware of the sort of the scientific aspects of what's sort of at work within my body, and also the relationship between the movements that I'm creating and the inspiration which comes from the science that we've been discussing. So it's kind of, yeah, that's been informing the way that I'm developing those movements and kind of reflecting the shapes that I'm thinking of in terms of the science. So yeah. And
I mean, we were just discussing with Deborah because when we were devising it, quite a lot for all the different sort of, just to describe Jugular as a show, we actually took 4 hours of new material to Secret Garden Party and Wilderness, and there was a past show which was sort of more orientated towards the biological sciences, such as the perception of time, memory, and evolutionary genetics, which we like to term the story of knowledge. And then we had the future section, which is essentially what we are bringing to London, November the 29th. Early bird ticket sales finish at midnight, by the way. Little plug. But we've come at creating work in a variety of different ways. Would you like to comment on whether you, for example, Deborah, arrived at it from the concept of the particular scientific theme, or was there also like, okay, this happens to me every day in life, like, memory, for example. Does it come from life, or does it come from an emotion, or does it come purely from your body, as you were saying?
Yeah, well, when we were devising for the memory piece, one of the ways we worked was, we sat down in the space and we were telling each other stories of the most potent memories we had, and those often came from sensations. So one of them was smell, the smell of our parents' perfume when we were younger, and how there is, of course, science to explain how this triggers a synapse in the mind, and then suddenly the sensation almost is relived in the body. But that's what we were interested in the devising process, is how is that relived in the body as an actor, as a performer? How do we express that in a way that communicates without words to an audience what it is to allow our sensations of life in the moment to bring memories, and how is that expressed in the body?
So they essentially get to feel what a memory might have felt like to them personally, or observing you how the actor feels on stage, having just listened to a lecture on how it might work in your brain in terms of neurons.
Yeah, and understanding, I suppose in that sense, what we're doing in relation to the idea of artistic and creative outreach of science is allowing an audience to be affected on an emotional level by the same thing that they've just been affected by on an intellectual level. So, and for us as actors, it was about allowing ourselves to be affected on a deeply emotional level.
And in fact, I'd just like to put this one out there, and any one of these scientists sitting here can choose to answer this. Is it a challenge to communicate scientific ideas with non-scientists as a result of their unfamiliarity with scientific jargon? So, for example, there are a great many buzzwords in science. Everybody's been talking about the Higgs boson this summer. Everyone knows its name, but how many people actually know what it is, or why is it important? Any takers on this?
Okay, jargon can be a barrier. I think it's actually not that difficult to talk about science without using those difficult words.
Yeah, I agree.
However, you can also explain what they mean, and people are not stupid. If you tell them what the words are, they're quite capable of using the words themselves in the correct way. Science is about precise language. It's about clarity. If you can't communicate your ideas clearly, you're not being a good scientist.
And it's not about dumbing it down.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. The analogy I like to use is that not everyone has the patience to learn a musical instrument, but everyone can enjoy music. And I think it's the same with science. You may not want to study it at university. You might not even want to study it at school, but you can still get really excited about the amazing, cool things that it tells us about the universe, about who we are, and what we're doing here.
And in fact, that brings me to counterintuition, which is something Adam was talking about, especially when it comes to your particular science. When we can say about art, a lot of the stuff that we say trying to do on stage is a little bit instinctive and possibly completely full of intuition. There's a merit of that being sort of juxtaposed with something that may seem counterintuitive when you have to study it in a particular way, for example with quantum mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, if I can go back to the previous point, actually, I think it's we can understand science without using lots of jargon, and I really like the way that Richard Feynman put it. He talked about how he was going to explain a very difficult part of quantum mechanics. One of the things that we do at university is we spend an awful lot of time learning a lot of maths. And this mathematical machinery is just so that we can calculate things very efficiently. And the way Richard Feynman compared what he was going to do was he spoke about the Mayans. And if a young Mayan wanted to know how the high priest was going to calculate when the next eclipse was going to be, the high priest could say, okay, go and learn concepts of numbers, and then I'll teach you all the rules about how you combine them in the most efficient way, how you do addition and subtraction. Or the high priest could say, well, I have this pile of beans, and I add some beans and I subtract some beans, and then the beans that I have left tells me when the next eclipse is going to be. And without being... and you can explain science in that kind of way. And really what you're doing is you're adding beans and subtracting beans, but you've just created a big mechanism to do that really efficiently. Mm-hmm. So you can tell people exactly what's going on without them having to go through the years and years of heartache I had to go through.
I think it's worth saying that there's no statement that's described in mathematics that can't be described in words. It's just that even quite a concise equation like Schrödinger's equation for quantum mechanics, that would take a really long time to explain exactly what that means in a precise fashion. If you wrote it out, it'd be probably a few pages. Having that framework of mathematics makes life easy for physicists once you've learnt it, but you can explain it precisely in words if you have to, or you can make it a bit more accessible.
No, I agree. I think maths is a language, and it's a language that's very good at expressing some kinds of ideas. But if you're good at French at school and hated maths, it's maybe a bit cheering to remember that maths is just another language. It's just a way of expressing ideas.
And in fact, you'd be a perfect person to ask then, do you think the public often have a reverse effect on how science is undertaken? For example, is it just that we, as scientists, are locked away in some towers and we come up with all these lovely ideas and decide they're really important and everybody else may know about it or not, but the point is, the advancement of science. However, is there also the role of public imagination? That's important to this as well.
I think the public do have a very strong role to play in science, and don't forget that scientists are members of the public too.
Absolutely.
So we're all part of that. But yeah, especially these days, the internet is really allowing members of the public to actually take part in real cutting edge science in a really meaningful way. Martin's already mentioned Galaxy Zoo, which is one of a suite of websites where you can go on and, as a member of the public, actually get access to real data from NASA telescopes, from marine biologists studying whale song, all these different things. And actually, as a member of the public, you can help them to understand what's going on and to increase our understanding of the universe that we live in, which is amazing.
I think that's great. There is a slight danger that we treat the scientists treat the public as cheap research assistants. I think there's a very strong argument that a lot of scientific research is publicly funded, and again, they should come back to this question of what do the public want to spend their sort of research council funding on. I mean, obviously, it doesn't just have to be very, very prosaic, day-to-day hands-on stuff, because there is an appetite in the public for the Brian Cox space entropy and the big questions of the universe, but I think the public has a role to play in telling us what we should be doing to some extent.
They are paying for it, so in a sense they have a right to be involved on that level. But I think a lot of science research is very relevant in ways that we perhaps don't explain clearly enough to people. In my own field, people studying Mars and Venus, sending probes to these planets.
Yes.
Of course, it's cool to see these places for the first time in human history, to understand what's going on there. The more we understand other planets, though, the more we understand our own planet. And of course, at the moment, we're all concerned about the challenges facing our world, its environment. These studies can actually help in really interesting, unexpected ways.
And yet, maybe only a handful of people that I know actually was aware of the fact that rover landed on Mars over the summer. It's been so under the bonnet.
Well, I think unfortunately the Mars rover arrived on Mars just at the same time as the Olympics,
which clearly overshadows everything.
I did switch over to watch the rover, but then I went back to watching the Olympics again. But it's still there, and it's going to be there for 2 years, and it's really the next year or so that it's going to start sending back really incredible data. Just high definition movies taken on the surface of another planet. How cool is that?
It's pretty cool. And apparently today they found out something that the soil on Mars is quite similar to Hawaii.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's go to Mars.
I'd rather go to Hawaii.
The weather's better in Hawaii.
It kind of brings me, when you're talking about public knowledge of science, some people are aware outside of the scientific community of the saying, publish or perish, which is a lot more common to scientists, I guess, to hear. In other words, if you don't keep publishing, your career as a scientist will die. And it has two connotations. One is it's the traditional method of forwarding science, and the other thing is it's peer-reviewed, which essentially means it constrains it within the self-same scientific world. What's happening right now is this sort of advent of open access journals, for example, you're mentioning on the internet, which kind of would mean like free readership. Is that right?
Well, there's a couple of different questions there. I mean, there's the question of free access to research, which I think is a no-brainer. Public's paying for the research; they should have access to it. There's various mechanisms to do that. One of which is just there's something in physics called the archive, where people just stick up their papers, even if they're in the kind of journals which are subscription only. So that, I think, is going to happen. There's no question about that. The slightly, I think, more interesting question is this idea that there's a potential to publish papers that essentially undergo post-publication peer review. At the moment, your peers review them, work out if they're good quality, and then they go out into the journals. And the idea is that, well, potentially you could just stick a paper up and it would, by aggregation, by people reading it and saying whether it was a good paper, the scientific community as a whole and possibly the public, it would become clear as whether it was a good quality paper or not. Which I think is a really interesting idea. I don't know whether that would be slightly dangerous.
Even if you have non-specialist knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, presumably there are some papers that would be amenable to that. The danger of that is that you could publish a paper which had junk science in it. But that happens anyway, even with peer review. I mean, the classic one being the autism MMR scandal a few years back, 15 years ago. So peer review doesn't get rid of junk science. So I think that's quite an interesting idea that, like with any content now, it's increasingly becoming the case that publication happens first and then the peer review happens. So, you can think about that with YouTube, with music. Wikipedia, exactly. And I think that's a really interesting model. Now, I don't know whether that would work, but I think that's slightly more radical than just the free access to information.
I mean, there's the idea of having Mathopedia or some sort, isn't there? Just put out a bunch of like mathematical concepts and thinking that it's all going to be, like world reviewed as such.
Yeah, I think the archive has been incredibly powerful in my field. So with people who do the theory of my side of quantum mechanics, the very first thing they do is publish it on the archive, and that's made science so much quicker because it can take many months to...
And that's completely open access, the archive. Anyone can access that, can't they?
Yeah, completely.
Can I just repeat, the archive, I think, is more sort of particular to physics rather than biology.
As I understand it, in theory, anyone can use it, but it's pretty much quantum physicists that do use it.
I think it depends a lot on which field you're in. So people who are scared of having their ideas stolen, like some parts.
Oh yes, publish or perish.
Exactly. Yep. So you need to get your publication first in order to defend your idea. Whereas in my field, they seem a bit more free to get out as quickly as possible and to share the ideas, which I think is a great thing.
I know there's the kind of issue with the idea of like star ideas, where it kind of feeds into the publish or perish thing, where people want to be a name because of the effect on their career as a result of coming up with an idea, and that actually kind of influences people into stealing ideas and kind of publishing things too quickly. And also, like with the autism case, the issue with that is the press grabbed hold of it before it was properly kind of formed as an idea. No?
It was. I can't remember. I don't know the full details of the story, but it was published in a journal, and it was a very small study. Is that right?
I think that was my understanding as well. Yes. But as you say, these things still can slip through the net of peer review. I think we're living in a very interesting time where the internet and information technology in general is changing the way we all access information, and that's really hard to see how that's going to pan out over the next few years.
Well, it fits in. I think scientific research is sitting in this wider context of intellectual property, and that can be artistic, it can be innovation, or it can be scientific ideas, and that's fascinating because you are getting that mix.
Absolutely.
Yeah, rather than hoarding your ideas that only other people who are in the same field as you have any interest or access to. I mean, I guess perhaps part of this sort of idea of familiarising the public to it through art, essentially, or performing arts, is something that I think Jugular is attempting to do. And in fact, I'd love to invite Deborah to actually give us a spoken word piece that she's just written, I believe.
Well, you asked me to meditate on space. and this is what came out. So,
And space is one of the themes we're going to be looking at on November the 29th, this is where Marek comes into it.
Mm-hmm. So in this piece, I think space for me, because I'm not a scientist, I feel space is like wind, because I can feel that I work with sensation. So that's how it comes out in this poem. Sweat, drip in the sweet waters of sleep, and freshly we wake. Eyes peering from wet water lake, there's no mistake. From nature to the freight train, tumbling rain on faces, eyelashes weep, drip, dazzle, and the river of clouds speak, sheer, cut away and creep. Through carriages, rusty metal creak, rattling rails speak, a rhythm of morning, moving, changing, leave, 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 now what do you see? Winds, quick, past your cheek, red with cold and passion, move, leave, creep, under the train, cut the trees, swing on branches, whipped by tailwinds of the last carriage. I'm alone on this place. I'm woken in this space, cold, with only sorry and dripping in rain. Pass away, washed by night, pulsing fright. I'm the sight, the scene, and only my eyes glean in this blackness. Only the moon is seen in the rivers that now pour down my cheek, my chest, my breast, hot with meaning that pounds, drops, heavy, and brings me tumbling to the ground. My feet wedged between the sleepers of the track. We are sleepers, but we are trapped. Hurtling towards me, moths and rain, pins prick through the train light, fright, 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 blinding speed as it rushes over me. I find that I am inside, body wet and pasted to the iron floor as I lie unseen in this metal box. Where am I? Travelling blocks, shocked, shot and unlocked. The clunk of chains that fall about me, they are taking me, but I am free. Houdini could learn a trick from me. Stay underneath the chains, then cannot rain. Metal flips, clips, and slips through my finger. I am sunk. Beneath the floor, face down, I watch the sleepers race. Beneath my eyes, they almost graze my smile and splinter my teeth as this train runs through me, charging to destiny. Taste, free. Let the wind of change come and savor me. Lick my body, prickling awake sensitivity, sensation. Almost pain. Taste me, please. I want to feel what it is again to be the delight for another entity. What it is for her to know herself only through me. The wind, she whips through me, lashing me a light for one moment. Breathless, I know I am taken still, with people here, but engaged. Down on both knees to her. Secretly tightening the leash which makes me stand ready. I see her flashing around the room in a wild frenzy, a lightning bolt that rips clean through people's chests, and then they see, look up into you for one moment, and then they feel she is gone.
Hi, I'm Ben DeVere. I'm from the Secret Garden Party and Wilderness festivals. It's Halloween. It's pretty spooky outside. I've got a little 4-month-old vampire on my knee, which is what these grumpy squeaks are. So I apologise for that. So I'm answering some questions here from Shama, from the legend that is Shama Rahman, about Jugular. Can you describe Jugular in your own words? What does it mean to you? Well, when I commissioned Jugular back in the day, I'm taking all credit for it here, we were looking to cross over disciplines as much as possible in terms of art and science. Shama's a girl after my own heart. She had some great ideas. We got together, we chatted about it, and then the list of scientists that she came up with, everything from molecular biologists to evolutionary geneticists and physicists and people talking about aging and chaos theory and memory, was really impressive. That was the first thing that struck us, and the way that they was going to be tied together with stories and songs and playlists and sorry, it was just really exciting because I mean, through the arts and the Secret Arts Foundation and all the other events that we do, we've seen kind of quite a lot of art science crossover, but this was seemed to be taking it to a new level. So that's why we're excited about it. That's why we commissioned it. What are your thoughts on the concept of fusing science and performing arts? Is it a vital role that's being filled in our understanding and appreciation? Is it philosophical too? Shama, that's a great question. I've done about 30 seconds worth of Google research on this very topic, and I found a nice little quote here from Max Born, which is, did you just say dada? I think we might have got our first word there, live on Resonance FM. You heard her here first. Science is not formal logic. It needs the free play of mind in as great a degree as in any other creative art. As in any other creative art. And I thought that was interesting. That the idea that science is got a bad rap for being kind of reductionist and logical, but it can be seen as a creative art just as much as other kind of more traditional arts, in inverted commas. And this is a good one from Einstein. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious, the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Now, that rings true with me, because whenever you read or watch or experience a piece of science, it does trigger the same kind of wow factor as when you're reading a beautiful passage of literature or listen to music, or I'm sure they've done studies on this and it's the same parts of the brain or whatever, but when you think about it, it's like they share the same fundamental questions at the end of the day, art and science, but they go about answering them in different ways. So a brain scan could, for example, reveal like the signs of depression neurologically, but if you listen to a beautiful piece of, I don't know, Radiohead or Beethoven, then it kind of reveals what depression feels like. So you need both perspectives and to really grasp the nature of what the mind's like, and they're rarely brought together until now, and it's kind of it's not a fad, it's a trend that I suppose that's been picking up over the last 5 to 10 years in live events, but I just think it's going to get deeper and stronger until the idea of studying one discipline in more and more detail until you're completely specialised is just going to go out the window, and I think it's all going to end up in a great big love-in of art and science forever, and that's what's going to save us, man. I believe that. So how did the summer go for us? This is the last question, and how do you think November the 29th will be very different? Well, now I am excited very much about November 29th, because the first run that you did at the festivals was really a first run, and it had a lot of potential, and I'm really interested to see what you do with your own space, with time to rehearse and kind of free reign over the environment rather than being forced to deal with a small slot in a busy tent at a muddy festival. So I'm really excited to see how it's developed. I'm excited to see which of the themes that you're going to be concentrating on, and the fact that it's more experiential and more secret and not so much just audience and stage is very exciting too. So that's my thoughts on the subject, and we look forward to having you back again in 2013 at Wilderness and SGP. Thanks, Jugular team, you guys rock. And big shout out to Marek Kukula, who I hear is in the studio. Hi, Marek.
And following that lovely spoken word poem from Deborah, we now have the very talented Shama Rahman and her band, who is Chris Lane and Will Smith, playing their new song, Time.
So this was actually also a response to one of the scientific themes, perception of time, for the show in the summer that we took to Secret Garden Party and Wilderness. Time is a great healer. In time, all you do is forget, and that allows you not to burn and stay and gasp forever. And you fall in love again, and you fall in love again. That sweet and chemical intoxication, and you think this is the reason why you're not with me. You'll forget everything, but there will be a little kernel, no matter how hidden or buried, that will know the truth, the reality of our love. And why it was and it will be led. You'll know when it goes.
Wow. Have we got any more questions before we close?
We've got one more podcast, in fact.
Oh.
So this is a podcast from Matt Brown, who is going to be the quizmaster for us on November the 29th. He's the editor of The Londonist. We'd just like to say this has been an exclusive show for Jugular, and love to re-thank all of our lovely contributors this evening. We have early bird.
Website?
It's www.facebook.com/Jugular Joining Head and Heart, and you should find our first event, which is called Jugular Experiment 1. Okay. And we've got early bird tickets till midnight tonight.
So be prepared to be part of a scientific experiment.
Secret. In a secret location. So without further ado, we'd love to close off with Matt Brown. We're here today with an exclusive for Jugular on Resonance FM, for those of you who've just joined us. And another exclusive we have right now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Matt Brown, who's the editor of The Londonist. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Shama.
Will you describe to us where we are in this area?
Well, we're in what we like to call Londonist Towers, which is a small office space in the middle of Shoreditch, which is in the kind of near East End of London. It's not too far from the City of London. It's a kind of strange mix in this area of young start-up companies, tech companies, lots of artists, certainly lots of street artists, and a large residential population as well, all kinds of different people mingling on the streets around here. So it's a very entertaining and interesting place to work.
And does it give you ideas to sort of like further this sort of interdisciplinarity that you see coming into London?
I think so. You're always stimulated by what's going on the streets. I go for my lunch each day to one of the 200-300 cafes in the area, all nationalities and all styles, like many parts of London, but I think even more so here. And on my way I'll see all kinds of street art on the walls, some of it only just gone up the night before, wasn't there the day before, won't be there tomorrow, replaced with something else. So there's constant stimulus around here of ideas, and just visually on the streets, even without talking to people. And of course when you talk to people you get even more ideas.
And all of this, I'm guessing, obviously feeds back into your day job as the Londonist editor.
Yes, that's right. So editing Londonist, it's my job to oversee the content that goes on the site, which is about 15 articles a day. It's quite a large amount of stuff goes on there. And of course we've also got a Facebook page and a Twitter account which also need filling up with content. So going out on the streets every day around Shoreditch, I do quite often stumble across something which subsequently becomes an article or a Facebook update quite easily. We've also got a podcast as well, so I'm always on the lookout for interesting guests for that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's kind of how we met with this idea of science meeting up with arts, I think, at an event that I curated at the beginning of the year. I'd love to ask you sort of like a general sort of opinion of something that we're trying to achieve with merging scientists on stage with performing artists.
London is replete with interesting venues that help foster this merging of science and art. Places like the Dana Centre in South Kensington, the Royal Institution, the Royal Society, very august bodies, but they're getting in on this act as well now. And of course the Wellcome Collection in Euston, which its bread and butter is putting on these kind of events all the time. Just to name a few, there are many other places around town.
And you mentioned like these august sort of possibly reputations they might have. Do you think like people are as well aware of these sort of mergings as they possibly could be, in the sense that do you think there's something unique that Jugular is doing by bringing it to a more accessible area, so to speak?
I think what you're doing is taking it out of a traditional venue and doing it in a secret location, which I can't reveal on this broadcast. But it is a very nice part of town, very interesting part of town where you wouldn't expect to find this performance. And I think that's making what you're doing unique and a little bit more interesting perhaps as well. I mean, I've been to countless events at both the Royal Institution and the Royal Society, and don't get me wrong, they're always very entertaining, very learned, very you come away with quite a lot from those. But it's nice to do this sort of thing in a totally new venue, with the promise of further instalments down the line that might also be in similar places.
Yeah, experiment one. So hopefully there'll be more experiments. And what do you think about you've been sort of observing our evolution since we sort of started earlier this year, even down to helping us choose the name or giving us ideas for something like that. And I was wondering whether you had any thoughts about the immersive nature, A, and B, the fact that it's across a wide variety of different art forms, and C, the fact that it's like almost a direct response to that particular scientific theme. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's certainly original. I think I've never seen anything that's quite as broad in terms of the types of act you have in there. You went last time from a kind of hardcore performance piece where it's very, very artistic and very fluid and lots of movement, and very arty. And then the very next thing was a doctor talking about some kind of, I think it's particle physics or something, I can't remember. It's in the middle of a field in Cambridgeshire, and my memory of that day is a little bit hazy.
That was Secret Garden Party.
Yeah, the festival atmosphere kind of got to me a bit there. But it's, so it's certainly, it's bold, it's definitely experimental, like you say yourself, and a breath of fresh air, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we'd love to be able to live up to that, and also we'd love to sort of ask you a little bit about your role in this show over the summer, and also what's coming up on the 29th of November, without giving it away too much, obviously.
Okay. Well, I'm as well as editing Londonist, I've got a strange sideline in running quizzes, and I do enjoy a bit of trivia, a bit of facting, and I'm going to be putting together a kind of fiendish, well, not too fiendish, people complained last time it was a little bit too hard, so this time around I'll make it a little bit easier for people. I'm not going to reveal what the subject is or what the kind of questions I'll be asking are, but there will be an interesting quiz there with prizes to be won.
Mm-hmm. And possibly a special bonus question.
Was there? I can't remember what it was about. Well, I'll throw in all kinds of bells and whistles, and maybe we'll have a prize for the stupidest name, or we'll have one for a particularly tricky question that needs a lot of guessing or whatever. But it won't just be a straightforward quiz. It'll be a little bit more immersive than most, and a bit more entertaining, I hope.
That's amazing. Really looking forward to it. I guess, what would you like to see of this interesting merge between science and arts in the years to come? Do you think it's going to grow as a trend?
I'd like to think so. As I say, there's lots of people doing this, and let's not forget that in the past, in the sort of Renaissance times when the Royal Society was founded, there was no real division between arts and sciences. Leonardo da Vinci perfectly typifies that, maybe 100 years before the Royal Society. With his famous painter, he's a famous scientist. He doesn't care about any kind of boundary between the two. It's all the same thing to him. And I'd hope that we'd move into some kind of maybe a new Renaissance where there is no kind of categorization like this. Everything is one.
I think that, you've touched upon our inspiration perfectly, because like the first poster we decided to do for Secret Garden Party actually involved that Renaissance man
Vitruvian man, yes.
Yes, exactly. And obviously then copyright came into, obviously we don't necessarily want to do that. But there's a hefty amount of philosophy that we went into when it came to devising the pieces, and what's now traditionally known as philosophy, and what used to be the science of yesteryear. And we hope to hopefully infuse that in everything that we do in the whole sort of ethos of the evening. But that'd be really interesting times ahead, I think.
I hope so.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.